Good day folks, my name is Sean and this is Air Photography. If you've just purchased the DJI Air 2S or perhaps you've upgraded from the DJI Mini 2, today I've got 25 tips for it and the DJI Fly App. If you've been using the Fly App for quite some time, you can probably go ahead and skip this video as there's probably not a lot new for you in it. However, if you're just learning to fly DJI drones and just learning to use the Fly App, there could be a lot of valuable information in it for you. I'm going to go through the tips quickly just so we don't make this video too long. So let's just jump right in. For tip number 1, I'm going to show you how you can manually adjust your horizon. If you're having problems with a crooked horizon, of course, if you're at home, you can go ahead and do a gimbal calibration. Just make sure you're on a flat level surface. However, if you're already up in the air flying, DJI has built in some tools, some manual tools to help you straighten out the horizon. So what we're going to do is click on the 3 dots at the top right hand side. We're going to go to Control, and you can see there it lists gimbal calibration. When we click on gimbal calibration, you can see it gives us 2 options. It has auto and manual. You would use the auto if you're at home and you're on a nice level surface. However, if you're up in the air, if you click manual, you can see it gives us some tools to straighten it out. We can adjust the horizon, but we can also adjust the yaw. That's basically side to side. Once you're happy with it, you can just close the X and your horizon should be fixed. Now for tip number 2, you can actually move the gimbal up and down, but also from side to side by pressing and holding on the screen. You can see here when I put my finger on it and press, I can drag around. So you can go up and down, but you can also go side to side. Now tip number 3 is to do with adjusting the exposure. If we click on the screen at any point, you can see we get this little box with the sun. We can actually grab that sun and slide up and down. You can see there that it adjusts the EV compensation down the bottom right hand side. So it's just another quick and easy way that you can set your EV compensation and adjust the exposure. Now for tip number 4, when you're going to go in and film a master shot, you can actually set the width, height, and length. That's going to dictate how much the drone moves around up in the air, and it can really change the look of the final shot. You can see there when we increase the height, length, and width, the time it takes to complete a master shot will increase as noted by the little counter. Now tip number 5 again is to do with master shots. You may have noticed if you're filming a master shot that you get a lot of props in the shot. And that's due to the way the drone flies, as it still has safety in mind. When you're flying a master shot, obstacle avoidance is enabled to help prevent you from running into obstacles. However, when you're in master shot mode, you can go into the settings and there is a new option. You can see we have the option for obstacle avoidance or composition. When you have composition selected, it's going to fly a little bit more traditionally, but the downfall is that you don't have obstacle avoidance. Now tip number 6 is to set the gimbal to FPV mode. And you can do so again by clicking the dots at the top. Make sure you're in the control section. And you can see there under gimbal mode we have follow mode, which is the traditional mode, but we also have that FPV mode, as you can see it highlighted there. FPV mode kind of gives you that traditional FPV look where the horizon will kind of match the movements of the drone, and it can give you some really dynamic looking shots to mix into your edits. It takes a little while to master that mode to make it look good, but definitely it's something to go in and try out. Now tip number 7, this is definitely important if you're new to these drones and new to the Fly App. You can see at the top and bottom of the screen we have these orange stripes. And what that is some visual representation of your obstacle avoidance. Those orange stripes will move around the screen depending where it detects the obstacle on what side of the drone. They'll also get larger as you get closer to the object. Now tip number 8 is to do with setting your home point. When the drone connects to satellites and you've taken off, it's already going to have a home point set. However, at any time you can go in and update your home point. You may need to do this, say perhaps you're in a park flying around and you've been walking as you're flying. You'll want the drone to come back to where you are and not where you took off from. And you can do this easily by clicking on the 3 dots. Make sure you're under the safety tab. You can see there we have an option that says update home point. And from there there's 3 different options on which you can update your home point. The first thing you can do is just tap on the map and drag around. As you can see, that is going to move your home point. You do have to use caution when using that method because you really don't know what you're setting your home point to. You could be setting it right above a tree or a building. Ideally what you want to do is use the buttons on the right hand side. You can see we have an icon for the aircraft and we have an icon for the controller. If you want to set the home point to where you're standing with the controller, you would select the controller. If you want to set the home point to where the aircraft currently is, you would select the aircraft. Once you exit out, you'll get a message that the home point has been updated to that location. So for my next tip here, we're going to talk about the map view. First of all, you can see mine down at the bottom left-hand side is set to a small icon. If we tap that, you can see it's going to make it bigger. and it'll just give us a quick preview of where we are. From there we can tap on it, and that's going to make it bigger, and we can scroll around to look at different areas. One nice thing about the map view is it's going to show you where you have flown. So if you have the drone up in the air and you've been flying for 10 minutes, it's going to have lines on the screen showing you exactly where you've been. This can come in handy if you ever get lost up in the sky. You can just follow your path back home. You can also use the map view to help find your drone if you've lost it, if it's crashed. We can also switch that map view into a compass. If we click that little icon on the very bottom right hand side, you can see it turns into what DJI calls the attitude indicator. It's going to show you some information. It'll show you where the drone is into relation to your controller. Now you can't see it because my drone and controller are together right now, and that way you know which way the drone is pointing compared to your controller. Again, it will help you come back if you get disoriented. Those two white lines on either side is also the angle of the drone up in the sky. So if it's a windy day and you're flying, it'll show you how the drone is moving around up in the air. And again with it, if you find it's in your way, you can minimize it to make it a small icon. Now tip number 10 is to do with adjusting the gimbal speed. And basically that's the speed at which it moves up and down. Again, if we click on the three dots at the top right hand side, we go to control. You can see there we have an option called advanced gimbal settings. And from there you can see we have all different types of controls. But what's important to note, you can see at the top of each one, you can see this first one here is listed normal mode. If we scroll down, you can see we have Sin Smooth mode. And then right below that we have sport mode. So that correlates to the flight mode that you're currently flying in. You can fly in Sin Smooth mode, normal mode, and sport mode. And you can adjust the gimbal according to each mode. For example, if you're in Sin Smooth mode, you might want the gimbal to move up and down really slowly, giving you a nice cinematic look. In sport mode, maybe you want it to move a little quicker because you're grabbing quick moving action. So you would just adjust the sliders according to what you like. Sometimes it takes a little bit of playing around. The first option is your pitch speed. That's how quickly it moves up and down. The next option is the pitch smoothness. That's how quickly basically it comes to a stop. When you stop spinning the dial, how quickly it comes to a stop. And because the Air 2S can move the camera from side to side like I already shown you, you can also set the yaw speed as well. Right now these are all the default values, and for the most part they're not too bad. Of course you can also adjust the speed at which the gimbal moves just by moving the dial a little bit, but sometimes if you're flying a complex maneuver, you're trying to move the camera down while you're doing a rotation, sometimes it's a little bit hard to do it all at once. So by slowing down that gimbal, you know you're not going to mess up your shot by having the gimbal jump up or jump down too quickly. Now for tip number 11, at any time, whether you're up in the air or your drone's on the ground, you can click on your flight status to bring up the safety menu. From there it gives you some basic information about your safety settings, your return to home altitude, your maximum altitude of flight, and your max distance. It's just a nice quick way to verify those settings instead of bringing up the full menu. Now for tip number 12, at any time when you're flying up in the air, you can click on the battery level icon and it's going to show you more detailed information. It's going to show you things like when it's going to auto return to home and when it's going to force to land. Now those values will adjust depending on how far you are away from your home point. If you're quite a distance away, the drone is going to return to home a lot sooner than if you're only flying 100 meters out. Now for tip number 13, just like you did with the battery icon, those three icons at the top, your RC strength, your vision sensor, and the satellites, you can click on them at any point and it will bring up more detailed information. It's a good idea to check that out once in a while just to make sure everything is functioning as it should. Now tip number 14 is to do with Pro mode. You can see right now at the bottom right hand side of my screen, the little camera icon says auto, but if we click on that, it's going to go into Pro mode. Basically with Pro mode, we can click on every one of those icons and adjust our settings. And you'll notice right beside it, some say A. That means that's still in automatic. And that's a really nice feature because you may want to go in and adjust your ISO, but you want to leave the white balance in automatic. With the way they have it set up now, you can leave some of the options in automatic and just adjust the ones that you want. Now for tip number 15, sometimes it's a good idea to enable your zebra stripes. Basically that will show you when things are overexposed. All you do is go into your settings, then under camera, you're going to scroll down until you see that overexposure warning. Enable it. Once you enable it and you come back out, you can see there if things are overexposed, you start to get these stripes. You can then use your EV compensation to adjust the exposure to get a nice even exposure. Now tip number 16 is to enable grid lines. Again, if we go to our settings, under camera, you can see there we have a couple different options. Myself, I usually have the horizontal and vertical lines on, but I also enable that center point crosshair. That crosshair in the middle can sometimes help you align your shot, and again, the grid lines can definitely assist you in lining up your shots, especially if you like to follow the rule of thirds. Some people don't like to have the grid lines on there as they find it distracting, so it might be one of those things where you just turn on once in a while when you need them. Now, tip number 17 is to enable AirSense. If you're not quite sure what AirSense is, basically it is a technology that DJI has built into the drone to help detect if there are aircraft in the area. Now, for most people, it's disabled by default. You do have to turn it on, and you do so by going into your settings. Make sure you're under the safety tab. You're going to scroll down until you see the option Advanced Safety Settings. When you click on it, you can see there that we have AirSense. Right now it's turned on. You can go ahead and turn it off. Or if yours is disabled, again, turn it on. Now, tip number 18 is to enable upward gimbal rotation. And basically what that does is allow the gimbal to look up a little bit. And to enable that, we're just going to go into our settings again. We're going to go over to Control. If we scroll down a little bit, you can see there we have the option for allow upward gimbal rotation, and we're just going to turn it on. You can see there once it's enabled, we can actually look up quite a bit. The only thing to keep in mind, if you accelerate at a high rate of speed, the gimbal is going to jump back down. Now, tip number 19 is to turn on subject scanning. Basically what that's going to do, it's going to automatically pick up cars and people and put little icons on the screen so you can quickly go in and follow them. To turn that on, we're going to go into our settings. You're going to go over to the control menu, and you can see there that it says subject scanning. Once it's enabled, you'll notice that it starts picking up vehicles and people. And it does it in real time, so as the drone moves around and new vehicles or more people come into frame, if you do a lot of tracking and following, it's definitely a handy feature to leave on. If you don't do any following and tracking, then sometimes it can be a little bit distracting, and it's a good idea to leave it off. Now, tip number 20 is setting the behavior of the function button. By default, a single press will turn on the LED on the bottom of the drone. A double press will point the gimbal straight down or recenter it, depending on what position it's in, but we can go into the settings and customize it. So if we go into our settings, again we go over to Control. If we scroll down, you'll see we have this option for button customization. We can customize a single press or a double press. And all we do is select the drop down menu, and as you can see there, it gives us many different options. So you can go in and set things on what makes most sense to you. Now, tip number 21 is to do with the signal transmission, and you can set it to smooth or HD. So let's go into our settings here, and at the top there, if we go over to the transmission tab, at the top you can see we have smooth and HD. For the most part, I leave mine on HD. That gives you the most detail when filming, but if you're going to be flying a fair distance and your signal strength gets a little weak, you can switch it over to smooth. That'll keep the screen from getting jittery and kind of locking up a little bit. It still gives you a nice clear picture, but it's just going to be a little bit smoother. Now, tip number 22 is about zooming. There's 4 different ways in which you can utilize the video zoom feature. The first most common way is just to click on that 1x button there. You can see it goes to 2x, so we've just zoomed in. And if we press it again, we're now at 4 times zoom. We'll take it back to 1 times. But you can also press and hold on it, and you can see we can manually bring it in and out. A third way is to pinch on your screen. As you can see there, as you pinch, we're zooming in and out. So that's just a nice quick way to access your zoom if you have to zoom in quickly. And lastly, the fourth way is to hold down your function button, press and hold, and then you can use the dial at the back. It's the same dial that you use for your gimbal, but when you're pressing and holding the function button, it allows you to zoom in. Now, tip number 23 is to do with D-Log. When you film in D-Log, basically you're filming in a flat color profile. That allows you to go in and color grade yourself, and for the most part you can get better dynamic range and a better image quality. However, the preview on the screen is going to look very flat as well. Some people can find that a little bit distracting when flying. So with a recent update, DJI has built in a feature to allow a real-time preview of what it would look like color graded. All you do to enable that is when you switch over to D-Log, just make sure you enable the toggle for preview. As you can see there, it gives us a more natural preview of what we're filming, but the recorded video will still have that flat look. Now, tip number 24 is to set the behavior of your obstacle avoidance. Again, if we click on our settings and we go over to our safety tab, at the top there you can see we have different options. We have brake, which is what it's currently on. We can set it to bypass, and when enabled, the drone is going to try and find a safe route either around or above the object. And sometimes you need to turn off your obstacle avoidance if you're trying to get in really tight to a certain subject. Perhaps you're doing some proximity shots and the obstacle avoidance is preventing you from getting too close. And that kind of leads us into tip number 25, our last tip, and that is to disable sideways flight. Perhaps you noticed there, when we set it to bypass, we get this new option that says disable sideways flight. When it's enabled, the drone will only move frontwards and backwards. You can move it up and down, but you cannot move it side to side. That can come in handy from time to time if you're trying to fly a straight line. Sometimes it's easy to accidentally move your stick to the side and move your drone. You can also use that icon on the side of the screen to disable and enable sideways flight. You can see we can press on it and enable and disable sideways flight. Well folks, that's my 25 tips for the DJI Air 2S and the DJI Fly App. Hopefully you enjoyed it and learned something new. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and we'll see you in the next one.